I'd first like to talk about the tree that gave us this beautiful yellow cedar. It came from Vancouver Island, way up in the mountains, above 2,000 feet, in a beautiful alpine forest. Up there, the weather conditions are very harsh and the growing season is very short, so it has very fine grain and it uses everything it can to guard itself against the harsh weather. Its bark is like scales and all the little pieces are independent of each other so it can withstand these harsh winter winds. Its boughs are very similar looking to red cedar, but when you see them side by side, you can see the difference. The tree that this wood came from was felled over 40 years ago. Back then, there was no market for yellow cedar, so the loggers just fell it and left it there to rot. Today, these logs are salvaged by cutting them up into pieces and flying them to the road with a helicopter. This prevents any damage to the small trees that have grown up around them. The design on the display case is the mother heron. Now the heron in our language is seen as a messenger that brings us a message of changes that are coming in our life. And when I carved her and I looked at her eyes, it really made me feel good because it gave me a feeling of calmness, of peacefulness. And so I don't exactly know the message that she's giving me, but I know it's good. And I'm going to take that and come into this new year with a feeling of joy and a feeling of anticipating something really good. And I hope you see the same thing in her eyes. And in her belly I put two little babies because that's the future. And we have to remember that the best thing that we can do is to love our children and support them at whatever they do. The figurine on the top of the display is Zunaqua, pronounced Zunaqua. And we call her the wild woman. And she lives out in the bush. And we used her idea, or whatever you want to call it, to sort of keep our children from running away from the village and going up into the bush and getting lost and all that kind of stuff. And we said, if you go up in the bush, the Zunaqua lady is there, and she'll grab you and take you away into the darkness. And so it was, always seen as a spirit that was out there that could get us if we wandered too far away from our family and village. And maybe we all need to think about that at times. Zunaqua, the wild woman of the woods. The bottom figurine on the display case is Bequests, pronounced Bequests. Bequests. Now Bequests is a strange little fella, and even though that this legend is very, very old, it really has a place in today's modern world. Bequests grew up as a clam digger. He dug clams with his mother when he was just a tiny little boy. And he grew up and he realized that the more clams he dug, the better he lived. And so he got married and had some children, and one day he was sitting on the beach looking out and he seen somebody go by in a canoe. And he thought, gee, I'd like to have a canoe and I could take my family up the inlets and tell them legends and all kinds of fun things. And so he started to work a little harder to get that canoe, and finally he got it. And had a whole bunch of fun with his family going up and down the inlets and around the islands. But then it started to crack and, it's all kinds of bruises and stuff, so he had to hire somebody to work on it. He had to dig more clams. And then his wife needed a new outfit. She wanted a better cape so it was warmer, and the kids wanted toys to play on the beach when they got someplace, and he had to hire all the carvers and more clams, and poor old Bequests, now he's digging every tide as hard as he can to keep this whole thing going. And one day, this guy comes along and he says, hey, I can tell you how you can dig 4 times as many clams as you can with your hands. He said, I made a stick that digs clams like crazy. Bequests said, "Hey, I want that." And the guy said, "Well, hold it a minute. You got to pay me 100 clams a week to use it. And by the way," he said, "you've dug all the clams on your own beach, and now you're digging on mine, and you got to pay me another 500 clams a week to keep digging on my property." Bequests thought, "Oh my God, I don't know if I can make it, but I guess I just got to try." And then he got thinking, well, I'll just get a whole bunch of people to help me, and I'll pay them in clams, and everything will be good, and I can get enough clams to finally make everybody happy. So away he went, and they were all digging clams like crazy, and they were just piling up all over the place, and pretty soon, Bequests realized that everybody in the village had plenty of clams, and they just didn't want any more, and they didn't want to buy his clams, and he had all this equipment and all these people and all these commitments, and his family had gotten used to living the high life, and poor old Bequests, he's just skin and bones, and his nerves are gone. And what happens? He goes out, and the Zunaqua gets him, and he never comes back.